Thanks all for coming to our fiscal commission meeting. And I note for the record that we have all members present, so we have a quorum. Okay, so moving on to the item of approving the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, great. So the agenda is approved. And next we'll move on to item 3, brief announcements from staff, commissioners, and city council liaisons. We'll start with the city council liaison if she's ready. Any announcements?
Good evening. Just to let you know that last night, City Council had a very long meeting. We ended at 1:47 and had a long discussion on the Village Farms development, which included in part a discussion of the fiscal analysis that you all considered many months ago. Can't recall how many months that was now, but, oh, my mic's not on. Sorry about that. Sorry, I thought I had it on and it was not. Were you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. But welcome to the new commissioners as well. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, that reminds me, maybe we have 2 new commissioners. Maybe we can do introductions. We'll let the new commissioners introduce themselves, and maybe all of us can also introduce ourselves so that they know a little something about us, why we're here, what we do. Can you start, Mike?
Sure, I'll start Michael Sapoznikov. I'm the alternate commissioner, the Deputy Attorney General in the Attorney General's office with the business litigation section, so CDTFA, FTB, tax agencies, Department of Real Estate, Department of Insurance. And then in town I have 2 children, one at Willett and one at Chavez. So I managed to not have them at the same elementary school. Not sure what else to say, but happy to be here.
Do we good? Just order. Oh, Don Garrison, work as a portfolio manager at CalSTRS in Sacramento. There's a pension fund. Lived in Davis for, 9 years. I have 3 kids. Public schools here.
Okay, my name is Reka, and I am an investment officer at CalSTRS, the Teachers Pension Fund. But prior to that, I worked with the Illinois State Treasurer, and so done a lot of work around investment policies and investments for the public sector.
My name's Eric Vink, and I'm a retired resident of North Davis. I joined the commission 4 months ago, was it, Kevin? As an alternate, but as of this meeting, I'm a full-fledged member. So, Michael, your time will come, I'm sure. Anyway, glad to be joining a full body tonight.
And I'm Leslie Ang. I've been on this commission for a little over a year. And this is my first term chairing, and this is my first meeting that I'm chairing, so I might muddle through it. Thank you for your patience. I'm a tax attorney at the Department of Tax and Fee Administration, and I've worked here since 2007 when I came for law school and never left.
My name is Mitch Marbayashi. I've lived in Davis for 2 years, but I grew up in Winters, and I work as a doctor for the VA, and I'm on the finance committee also for the California Association of Family Physicians, so finance is an interest of mine.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Heather Huff. I'm a new commissioner as of tonight, so I'm really happy to be joining you. I do education policy work professionally, so work with agencies at the state level and at the local level to improve resource efficiency and outcomes for kids. So I'm really eager to apply those here at home. I have 2 kids in schools here in Birch Lane and at Da Vinci High School.
Just a real quick reminder that when you're talking, if you can turn on your microphone and then turn it off.
Hello, I'm Kevin Harper, and I'm a certified public accountant. I've spent my whole career working only with local governments here in Northern California, doing audits and internal control work, fraud and forensic analysis, helping them implement new accounting standards, etc. And so I've served on several commissions and committees for various communities as well. And I've served as an elected official for a school board and as a city auditor. So I've got perspective on, how other governments do similar things as the city of Davis, and I hope that can be helpful to our considerations. And I have, besides my wife and I being new to the city, my son and his kids live here in the city as well.
Thanks, everyone. And maybe staff would like to introduce themselves. We have some changes. And then
Thank you. So as you know, former Finance Director Elena Adair accepted a position in a different city. So we have a little bit of a different configuration down here this evening, and we will have the same configuration for the next couple months until we're able to get a new permanent Finance Director on board. So Louis Clark-Wardle, of course, is continuing to help serve as a staff liaison. I'm Kelly Stakowitz. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I'll be helping out for the next couple of months. And then behind me, is Alexis Eastwood, who typically is our Deputy Director in Public Works, Utilities, and Operations. But for the next couple of months, she is serving as our Interim Finance Director for Budget and Operations. So she's one person by day, another person by night. But any of us are available to help with the commission if you have questions or need to contact or reach out to staff. In addition, Karen Saranjeet, who is our finance manager, she is not here this evening, but she's also available to assist. So thank you for your patience while we go through this interim period.
Awesome. Any announcements from commissioners? Nope. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is public comment. So at this time, any member of the public may address the commission on matters not listed on the agenda. Okay. Then let's move to item 5, the consent items. Any discussion on the consent items?
Yes. I would like to pull item 5A for discussion.
Okay. Great. Do we need a motion to do that?
No, you just pull the item and then go ahead and continue with the rest of the consent calendar and then come back to that item.
Okay, so we'll pull item 5A. Is there a motion to approve it as amended without 5A?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second, so that carries. Okay, so let's talk about item 5A, which is the fiscal year 2022 ACFR and the single audit.
Yes.
I don't think there was a vote on the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Going back to the motion on the approving the consent items as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes or abstentions? Nope, then the motion carries. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, on item 5A, I just had a couple of questions since I'm new to the Fiscal Commission about this. So the first question is related to the timing. So we're getting the 2022 audited financial statements now in 2025, and so I'm anxious to learn about what is the delay and what the city's plan is to get caught up on that.
So yes, we are also anxious. Normally we would be providing the financials and the single audit, approximately 6 months to 9 months after the close of the fiscal year. That would be what is typical and what is expected. We got behind with our FY20 audit, and we are still working to catch up. There's a long list of reasons why we got behind. It wasn't anything that was terrible about the actual financials or the audit itself. It was really a matter of staffing, a number of changeovers, staffing bandwidth, etc. We have been working with our auditor team. We have a contract auditor, and we have been working with that team for the past, really, I'll say year, to put together a schedule, stick with the schedule, and get caught up. With each subsequent year,
it's been a little bit easier and a little bit quicker, and we're working right now with the auditor, getting them all the information for FY23. And then once that is done, we have a pretty rapid succession to complete FY24 and then FY25. All of that said, our schedule that we are on right now would have us caught up and have us completed with FY25 by about July of 26 of next year. So that's the current schedule that we're on. This is not something that we're excited about, but it was just a matter of a number of staffing issues or lack of staffing issues that led to it. So does that answer your question, or?
Yes, although that's a very aggressive schedule, if you're able to meet that, is that
Is it realistic?
yeah, is it realistic?
Yeah, we think so. While we haven't completed FY23, and you do have to complete the financials before you can do the single audit and so on, before you go to the next year, we have been working through 24 and 25 kind of simultaneously as best we can, so that once we complete 23, we are ready to go with everything for 25, and then subsequently 25. We think we can do this. We brought on some additional consulting help to be able to backfill both the absence of the finance director, but then also specifically to work on audit catch-up.
And what, does this affect our bond rating or cost of financing by not having audits?
So the short answer is yes, it could. The longer answer is we've been working with our granting agencies. That's our first concern, is making sure that we're able still to receive grants, whether that's from federal government, although there's some other complications there right now, or the state agencies. And so we've been working and keeping them in communication with what's happening and what our delays have been. And so we're just trying to take it one step at a time and get caught up.
So are there grantors that are withholding money because of the lack of audits?
There are not, we have not had that yet, but we have been, and that's because we have been communicating. We know that could happen. That is a possibility, of course.
Okay. My second question, if I may. So the auditors in the 2022 audit had 20 findings, nine in the single audit report, and something like 20 more in the internal control memo, which is a lot. So how does that tie into, you said that it hasn't affected us in terms of operations, but how is that? Anyway, what's the city's plan related to that?
Sure. Some of the things some of the findings have been, were already corrected, but because we're behind, there's still findings. Like, we've corrected them now, and we're doing different procedures, different operational things, but there were still findings because we're late in getting the audits out. We do have a long list of findings that we've been working through to make sure that we've corrected everything, or put new procedures in place, etc. So I don't know how to answer it other than to say that we are working through them all.
Do we expect to see a similar number of findings as we get to the 23-24 fiscal years?
I hope not. I hope there'll be fewer. So we are much more accustomed to seeing just maybe a couple of findings, but not a long laundry list.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, if there's no further questions, we will move to the next item. And that's the regular items, item 6.
Actually, Madam Chair, that was just information. Okay.
So moving on to item 6, it sounds like we have a presentation on the Willow Grove Development Project. So Eric Lee, who is our senior planner, will introduce the item and you'll introduce Matt as well.
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Eric Lee, Senior Planner here at the City. I've been working with the applicant on this project, and we're pleased to be presenting it to you tonight. I'm also here with Matt Coda, a City Consultant from Bay Area Economics, who prepared the fiscal impact analysis that we're asking you to review. And so what we're asking tonight is for your feedback on the assumptions, primarily with the fiscal impact analysis, and any comments you may have as well on the potential funding mechanisms related to open spaces. Again, no specific decisions have been made, but any comments that you have will be forwarded and brought to Planning Commission and City Council as this project kind of moves through the process. The project itself, we've been working with the applicant for about 3 years or more now, and it's been an ongoing process with city staff in reviewing it and providing comments and kind of fine-tuning it. And that's the planning application primarily that they've submitted that we've been reviewing, and those are related to the land use entitlements that are necessary to move it forward. At the same time, at the direction of City Council, we've been just bringing this project pieces of the project to the various commissions, so 6 different commissions for input and feedback, and the Fiscal Commission, of course, being one of those on this part of it. And then there's also the environmental review, which is ongoing as well. An EIR is being prepared, and we're expecting to have that released for the public in the next week or so, and then there'll be a public comment period related to that. Once we kind of get through all of that and finish that process, it will be scheduled for Planning Commission and City Council for their consideration, and if that's successful, it does require a measured JRD vote. On the right-hand side is the location. It's at the northeast, just on the northeast edge of the city, adjacent to the Wild Horse and Palomino developments, and just north of Covell Boulevard. And so it would require the city vote. If that's successful, then it could be annexed into the city, and then they could get into the hard work of actually doing improvement plans and construction documents and starting to build it. That's kind of the general process on the project. The project itself is a residential community. It's about 232 acres in total, with 1,250 housing units. The residential units are a mix of single-family, detached, attached townhomes, as well as higher density areas for multifamily condos and affordable apartment units. And there's kind of a good mix, as you can see here, the breakdown of the types of units and the acreage. There's community park and park areas, green belts, a lot of open space, as well as urban transition area along the edges, so adjacent to the active agricultural uses that would remain if this project is built. And then there's also some small retail area just to help serve the neighborhood, provides an eclectic kind of mixed use for the neighborhood, for the area. In addition, in the community park, the applicant is proposing a gymnasium that would be given to the city, that would be able to accommodate indoor recreation programs that the city is not able to provide at this point. And then, while not shown on this, they are reserving a potential site for a fire station should that become necessary, should the city decide to move forward with that. So those are a couple other pieces related to the project. For the planning application, so these are the general land use entitlements that are required to address the approval documents related to the general plan. So we require a general plan amendment for the land use, the zoning documents, as well as development standards, which are in the final plan development. The applicant was also included a tentative subdivision map that's a little bit different from all past measured JRD vote projects that we've had, and that's kind of a next step almost in the process. So they're kind of developing that additional commitment that will allow them to do construction sooner if they're successful. There's an affordable housing plan that's necessary to show compliance with the city's inclusionary requirements, and also a development agreement that accommodates or is able to take into account other considerations and like timing and fees and things that are maybe outside of the normal application process. So all the requirements for the project would be incorporated in some way as in these different documents, whether the zoning or development agreement or the map application, things like that as we go through that process. But for tonight, again, we're presenting the fiscal impact analysis, which which was prepared for the project. It's consistent with previous fiscal impact analyses that the city has had prepared for projects, but it builds upon them. And for the basic assumptions, Matt will go into that a little more in more detail when he speaks. But generally, it does really update the data, update the assumptions based on current conditions and fiscal conditions, as well as updated budget that we have. Uses the project-specific information to this project, and also it incorporates and addresses the gymnasium and the fire station that site that I mentioned. The FIA does identify 3 basic cost scenarios related to the fire station, and again, Matt will go into that in a little more detail, but there's kind of a mid-cost assumption, a mid-cost scenario, a low-cost scenario, and then a higher cost scenario. And then finally, for the funding mechanisms, these are just presented because the open space areas need to be addressed as well, and so these are some possible ways that the fiscal impacts could be addressed for those. It might be this landscaping line maintenance district or community facilities district, or I guess in some cases, projects that have had a third party kind of involved to take care of some of these areas. And so if you have any comments on that, we're happy to take that, and that could be part of our continuing discussions with the applicant, and also would be presented to Planning Commission and City Council. The fiscal impact analysis is attached to the staff report, and then also attached is a memo, which is a peer review that the applicant provided on their side when they reviewed it. Generally, it does concur with the findings and the assumptions and the analysis. They do raise some different clarifications and different adjustments that they wanted to point out, as well as kind of some comments related to the fire station allocation. But they can speak to that a little bit more, and Matt will speak to the fiscal impact analysis. So I think with that, for the recommendation, after our presentations, and the applicant will also have a presentation, we're happy to take comments or questions that you may have on anything at that point. There's public comment, and then whatever discussion and feedback you have, we'd be happy to take that. So I think with that, I'd like to turn it over to Matt and let him present the analysis.
Thank you, Eric. Is this okay? Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. As Eric hinted, this will be familiar to those of you that were here for the presentation on Village Farms back in April, I believe. So it's the same fiscal impact model, but updated for the particulars of the Willow Grove project, and then also updated with the 25-26 fiscal year budget. Just again, an overview what the fiscal analysis is. It evaluates the potential fiscal impacts of the proposed project. It considers the impacts to the City of Davis General Fund for ongoing provision of various city services. It does not address one-time capital costs. It does not address costs or revenues that are associated with the city's enterprise activities that are funded separate from the general fund. So with that, for this particular analysis, the proponents provided a 5-year absorption period for their project, and then we extended the analysis out for a total 15-year projection period, so we could see how those costs and revenues escalate over time, even after the project is fully absorbed out to that 15th year. As mentioned, the starting year $1 figures are based on the fiscal year 25-26 budget. They inflate over time based on some key assumptions, which are listed in Exhibit A of the fiscal impact memo, and we'll talk about a few of those key assumptions in just a moment. And again, looking at how the fiscal impacts ramp up as the project builds out, so as homes are constructed and occupied, the services are ramped up in that area, how does that affect the city budget? On these key assumptions, so these are all the same as used for Village Farms. So consistent with that, we have the general inflation rate at 2.5% per year. The assumption is that personnel costs will increase for the next 10 to 15 years at about a 4% rate due to some accelerated increases in various benefits and compensation and so forth. Then that expectation is after that period, the inflation rate would level out for personnel costs and be more comparable to the general rate of inflation. For the population and employment generation of the project itself, again, same assumptions as Village Farms, except Village Farms did not have a for sale high density component. So we have a 1.69 persons per household assumption there, and this is based on American Community Survey data for the city of Davis for those kinds of multifamily housing projects for sale. And then we have the various assumptions, again, as used in Village Farms for the for sale medium and low density. So these are your typical single family detached housing units, and then the rental apartments. For the daycare center, 1,000 square feet per employee, similar to Village Farms, as well as the retail assumption of 500 square feet per employee. Service cost variability. So this is the notion that in your city budget, certain costs are more fixed than variable as the community grows and the city is expanding its services for a greater population base. So this analysis, as in prior analyses, not just for Village Farms, but for other analyses the city's conducted over the years, assumes that the cost variability is 75%. So 25% of the cost more or less fixed for most of the services that we're modeling on an average cost per DOE basis, and I'll explain that in just a moment as well. Property valuation is a key driver of fiscal impacts, given that property taxes, property tax in lieu of vehicle license fee, and even to a much lesser extent, property transfer tax is all driven by the value of the real estate in the project. And so you can see our assumptions here, again, for the for sale high density units. These are average costs per unit or average values per unit. And these are kind of weighted over different, they're actually two different phases that the applicant uses to characterize their project. And these are average weighted for the different density categories over the project. The non-residential valuation of $400 a square foot, and then we assume that the affordable apartments, the gym and classroom facility, which would be dedicated to the city, and the daycare center, which would be privately owned, but presumably able to receive a property tax exemption for charitable purposes. So all of those we assume are not generating property tax revenues. For the property tax allocation, this is important. This property is not in the city, as you all know, would need to be annexed to the city. One of the requirements of the annexation proceedings is for the city and county to negotiate a revenue sharing agreement, which would dictate how the existing pie of property tax revenue is reallocated, with some of what the county is currently retaining for its purposes being shifted to the city in recognition the city is taking on service responsibility once the property is annexed. So this analysis assumes a 50-50 reallocation of that existing share that's available to be reallocated. And that is similar to recent annexation agreements that the city's been able to negotiate with the county. However, we'll note that those negotiations for Willow Grove have not happened yet and would be someplace out in the future. So this is a little bit of a placeholder in terms of we need to make some kind of assumption about what that allocation would be, and this seems like a reasonable place for where we are right now. On the absorption, again, how fast this project would build out. So per information shared by the project applicants, the for sale units we're assuming would be built out over the first 1 to 5 years. The affordable apartments would be scheduled to come in at year 3. so the third year after the first units are being occupied within the project. The non-residential development, we're assuming comes in at the very end of the development period, so year 5. The fire station, in consultation with city staff, indicated that given this rapid absorption of the residential units, that the fire station should be in place by year 2. So that's a little bit different assumption than what we had for Village Farms, which had a much more extended absorption period, with units not coming online as quickly, so a slightly later date for bringing that fire station online in that analysis. The streets and green belts are assumed to kind of pace and be developed in line with the pace of the residential development, so kind of spread evenly, more or less, over years 1 through 5. But then the parks, the applicant has indicated that the parks would be constructed and then dedicated to the city for the city to take over maintenance at year 5. So there's a kind of a handoff point there at the end, once all of the units are more or less completed and developed. Back to these techniques, so I mentioned that service cost variability, that really comes into play in this average cost or revenue multiplier approach, which is kind of looking at the average per dwelling unit equivalent service cost or revenue that the city currently has for a given revenue item or service cost, and then applying that to the future development, assuming that future development generates a similar demand for and cost of services as the existing development. The case study approach is a little bit different, where we can identify specific service standards, revenue generating characteristics of the project, and develop estimates of the costs or revenues that are generated by the project. An example of the case study approach for the service costs would be this analysis that we have done for the new gymnasium as well as for the new fire station. So service cost variability doesn't come into play for either of those. And then for the revenues, property tax revenue is a good example of where we're directly modeling the value of the homes, the property tax share that's available, and how that would get split up and generate property tax revenues for the city. So to jump to the results of the analysis, as Eric mentioned, we have 3 cost scenarios that we analyzed here, and the real big variable in this analysis is how we allocate the cost of the proposed 4th fire station within the project. So there's a mid-cost scenario, there's a low-cost scenario, which are actually very close to, they're not much difference there. But then there's a high-cost scenario, and I'll talk a little bit about those. So the mid-cost scenario looks at adding a 4th fire station to the City of Davis's fire protection EMS system at a cost of about $3.5 million per year, taking that total system cost and allocating it pro rata across all of the development in the city, plus the project, and then giving the city, or the project, its pro rata share of that cost. So it assumes that the project, as other development within the city would benefit from the availability of not just a fire station right there within Willow Grove, but also the other stations that provide backup and additional capacity elsewhere in the city. So that's the mid-cost. The low cost says, okay, what if we allocate that same overall system cost to not just the existing city and the project, but to some other growth elsewhere within the city that we think would happen just through the natural course of growth and development that would occur. And so that gives a slightly larger base of development to share those costs, which means a slightly lower allocation of costs to Willow Grove. And then finally, we have this high cost scenario, which doesn't look at the system approach, but just says there's a new fire station in Willow Grove. There's a $3.5 million cost per year to operate that. What does that look like if we bring it online in year 2, and we're looking solely to Willow Grove and its revenue generation to help offset the cost of that new facility. And then, of course, that cost inflates over time. Not surprisingly, that is not a fiscally viable scenario. A project like Willow Grove, or even one quite a bit larger than Willow Grove, would not be able to support the cost of the fire station all on its own, in addition to supporting the cost of all the other public services that the project would require. When we look at the mid and low cost scenarios that give it that fair share allocation, those are essentially break-even propositions as far as the fiscal projections go. So there's a 15-year period, a lot of things can happen over 15 years. There's a lot of details probably of the project itself in terms of how it gets developed and what the units would look like and sell for and so forth. So there's a margin of error in this kind of analysis where we ended up very similar to where we ended up with Village Farms, is that it's in that range where we say it's essentially a break-even. In this case, some slight negative cumulative and net present value figures, but they're very small relative to the overall revenue generation, overall cost generation. So it's kind of within that margin of error. So fundamentally, this is not a project that would pose significant fiscal concerns for the city, but also not one that would create major fiscal benefits or surpluses for the city unless something changes significantly with either the project itself or the city's cost and revenue structure. I think that is all we have on that, so happy to answer questions if folks have any.
Yeah, do we have any clarifying questions from commissioners?
And I might ask, we're happy to take questions. The applicant also has a presentation that might answer some questions as well, so if you'd like to hear from them, but whatever the commission feels.
Yeah, we can do that. Why don't we hear from the applicant first in case it answers some of the questions?
Sorry about that. Thank you. All right, hi everybody. It's wonderful to see familiar and new faces tonight. My name is Vanessa Ericardi, and I am one of your project team for Willow Grove. And we will actually start by introducing our team. So as I mentioned, my name is Vanessa Ericardi, and I run a marketing consulting firm called Marketing Simplified, and I'm representing Willow Grove. I've lived in Davis for over 25 years. I formerly was chair of the Social Services Commission. I have 2 children that attend schools here in Davis and DJUSD, and I care deeply about our housing situation and providing opportunities for the missing middle and all kinds of people in the economic ecosystem. As you can see, we have a robust team. So Eric mentioned that we've been working with the city for quite some time. So this project has been in development for many years. The first time I recall meeting with the city and talking about project features was 2021. And we've done a lot of outreach work with not only decision makers like you, but also just people in our local neighborhoods, our constituents in the city. And we've been working hard on really making this project uniquely Davis and really bringing what we value in town to this project, a lot of which you'll hear about tonight. And as Eric also mentioned, one thing that makes us distinctly different and that has really never been done with Measure J before is our tentative map. So we'll be bringing some very detailed, solidified plans to you tonight for your review. Introducing additional team members who are here tonight, we have Bree Mobius. She is our lead attorney. She will be doing the lion's share of the presentation. Also, Allison Olson. She is another wonderful member of our team and has been doing a whole bunch of outreach work, and you've probably seen her out and about at events. And then we have Tom here. Tom is a land economist. We brought him tonight so that he can answer some of your questions. He also peer-reviewed the studies that have already been done. I will spare reading the rest of this slide to you, but again, we have brought a lot of people into our orbit in these last 4 years to really make sure that everything we're presenting to you tonight has been double-checked, T's crossed, I's dotted, although we don't really learn cursive anymore, but you guys get it, right? Right, okay. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Bree now.
Good evening. My name is Bree Mobius, and I'm happy to be here with you tonight, although I will admit up front that math was not my favorite subject. I taught at UC Davis Law and I taught civil rights law. So Tom, if there's any technical questions, I'm going to lean into him and have him come up, but I will give you an overview of our project. So Eric mentioned the project site, so you're probably familiar with it. Things I'd like to highlight, we're just east of the Wild Horse community, and we have an existing grade separating crossing that goes under Covell, and we're very close to Harper Junior High. And just for the key project features, we will be 1,250 new homes. 20% of those will be deed restricted affordable apartments. And then an additional 23% or 288 will be what we call attainable by design, so condominiums. So they're going to be more affordable than a detached single family homes, but to provide new opportunities. So 43% of our project is attached housing, and the remainder is single family housing with different densities. We have 19.2 acres of parks, and then we are also proposing an indoor gymnasium. That was something we heard from the community, that there was a need for an indoor gym, particularly for women's and girls basketball leagues, and so it will have a full-size basketball court that will be available to the community. We also have 1.5 acres of neighborhood commercial that is going to be integrated with our with our community park. And so the idea is you can come, grab your beverage of choice and go watch your kids' game, or come and meet friends for coffee there. And that was something we also heard from the community, that there's really not walkable options right in that area. And then we'll have 8.7 acres of neighborhood green belts and 3 miles of new bike and pedestrian paths that connects to existing trails. So we'll connect to the Wild Horse Buffer and then the Guild Trail in our northeast corner, and then we'll connect to the existing undercrossing. And then 44.3 acres of urban ag transition, and we'll be adding over 2,500 new trees to create our urban forest. And then I think you also heard from Eric that we'll have a daycare facility that will be part of our affordable apartments. And this has really been a long process to get here to you tonight. We started in 2021 with a preliminary application to the city. So we before we submitted our Form 1, met with city staff and received feedback on our project, our design, made modifications. And then in 2022, we had community outreach meetings to hear what does the community want to see in our project. And so that's where features such as the community gym were added into the project. And then in 2022, we submitted our formal application to the city. From 2023 to 2024, the city's been reviewing that formal application, providing feedback, we've made revisions, and along the way, then we've been preparing our tentative maps that I'll talk to you a little bit about, and then the environmental review and completing that, and that brings us to your commission today. We are really proud of our tentative map and that we are the first development project in Davis to go through a JRD process and to prepare a tentative map in advance of the ballot for the public. And the Subdivision Map Act, it's one of the more archaic areas of law, because if you think about property rights, it's one of our most valuable things that we have, but it needs to be able to be passed on. So when you buy your home, you need to be able to sell it to the next person, to the next person. So state law has created a very demanding system before you can create a legal parcel that an individual can own and transfer. And so you have to comply with all of that process to show that you can create this legal lot. It requires a lot of engineering. We have to show our phasing, our backbone infrastructure, where every pipe is going to go, so that we can show our development is feasible and that we can build it. Once it's approved, so the city approves what's called a tentative map, and you can have a large lot map, which is just large swaths of land. That's essentially how you can get bonding and funding and sell that land. But to create the small lot map that can create the individual parcel that you or I can own, the city approves what's called a tentative map. And once we have our tentative map, then we go and we put in the backbone infrastructure, we put the roads in, we put that in, then we come back to the city. And the city, before they give us our final map to create those lots, has to determine that we substantially conform with the small lot tentative map. So it's the city's check to make sure what we've said we will do, that we've done. And again, we are the first project that's done that. A big reason why is it's a significant investment. It's a significant investment of time and money on behalf of our team to advance that money up front in advance of going before the public with a vote. And this is just to give you an idea. So this is actually taking our tentative map down to each tree on our landscaping plan and doing an aerial image so you can get an idea of what it will look like once it is developed. And a key thing that a tentative map does, and I think you heard Matt mention that we have an I don't know if the word you used, an advanced, or I don't think the word's aggressive, but a fast absorption schedule. And the tentative map is one thing that allows us to do that absorption schedule where we can build out within 5 years. And a lot of developers will take the large lot maps and they'll kind of break up your area, and then they'll get phased small lot maps. So they'll come in and they'll get one small lot map here, one small lot map there, and it can build out over a long time. We are doing a small lot map for the entire project up front, and so that saves us about 1.5 to 2 years after voter approval to go through the map phase with the city at that time. With that schedule, we're anticipating that with a city council approval in spring of 2026 and a ballot in November of 2026, that we can have Productions Home completed by spring of 2029. And I've broken up there, and I have a much more detailed schedule if anyone's interested in it, but I've broken up there some of the major milestones for us to hit that, where we'll have model homes, and then completion of homes for sale in spring of 2029. The fire station, I think it's been a hot topic, and I heard there's some movement even as late as this morning, I guess. But we have reserved land for a potential fire station at the request of the city. So ultimately, we want to collaborate with the city, we want to collaborate with fire. Whether there is another fire station in the city is not our decision, it's up to the city to make that decision. So, we don't have an interest in that. We've been asked to reserve land, we've agreed to do so. We will reserve that land. We do think, and EPS's memo covers that it's not realistic to put the entire burden on Scenario 1C on a single project. That just doesn't happen, and so I think it gives a negative fiscal image that's not realistic. So that would, we would ask your commission to maybe make that note in your comments if you're so inclined, but ultimately whether there's a fire station is really up to the city, and we will have the land available if it is needed. We do want to highlight, because we realize, and Matt mentioned who was here in April with the Village Farms, and we do want to highlight that it's not as simple as picking up the Village Farms fiscal impact analysis and picking up ours and looking at the bottom numbers and comparing them. There was significant differences in the city budget between when the April Village Farms FIA was prepared and ours. And to quantify that, it's about a 16.5% increase in the city budget that has happened since then. If you take that down to the units, I think I have that number up there, but it's about $5.6 million over the 15-year period that is associated with our project. So if we were prepared, if our fiscal impact analysis was prepared in April under the prior city budget, we would actually show about a $5.6 million surplus that we don't show because it's a different budget. We think it's entirely appropriate and prudent that the city use the current budget, so we're not raising issue with that. We just want to make sure that your commission is aware that there's a major difference between the two fiscal impacts analysis, and that you're looking a little deeper when you're just comparing the numbers on that. And then also, because we are proposing a gym, we will build the gym and give it to the city, but that does, our fiscal impact analysis does take in the cost, the city's cost of that gym that's not in the Village Farms fiscal impact analysis. And then we do want to highlight some additional considerations for your commission tonight. That the fiscal impact analysis does not, it's not intended to capture the additional benefits that we are proposing, but they are economic benefits and community benefits to the city that we would like your commission to consider as you're looking at it. We wouldn't consider us just fiscally neutral. In the fiscal impact analysis, we are, but we think that with the added benefits, we're really giving a fiscal benefit to the city. One of those is the fair share traffic fee. We will be contributing a substantial sum that the city is in the process of calculating per unit to help fix traffic problems at 24 intersections, including the interchanges. And so that is something that the city does not have the current funding for that. And a lot of those intersections are existing issues today. And so we will be providing a substantial sum to assist with that. And then we also are committed to providing additional funding sources, likely through a community facilities district or a similar funding mechanism to ensure that the city has continuing operating costs for example, the community park, the green spaces, the urban ag, and so those will be something that we are not asking the city to take on without making sure that they have an adequate funding source to do so. And then we will also have homeowners associations for all of our attached units. So the condos and the affordable apartments will have homeowners associations, and then those associations will be responsible for the roads and maintenance of the landscaping within those areas. And then really what we're most proud of our project is what we bring the community that we are going to build and give to the city. And the affordable and attainable housing is helping the city meet its regional housing needs allocation. We are also providing home housing opportunities for the school districts to address the declining enrollment. We also have inclusive housing, and we are partnering with Alta Regional California Centers to provide housing opportunities within our affordable site for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We will be a sustainable, all-electric community that elevates Davis's values. We will add 3 new miles of bikes and pedestrian walkways, and we will connect to the existing Wild Horse Trail, the Guild Trail, and the existing undercrossing. We are going to increase, so Channel A runs to the north part of our property. Currently, there are agricultural operations that are in pretty close proximity to Channel A. We're going to increase to have a 50-foot buffer north and south of Channel A. We are also going to increase, we are also going to address existing flooding problems that the city has downstream of us by adding a detention basin north of Channel A that would capture water when there's existing flooding today. We will have over 2,500 new trees for a new urban forest. We will provide land to the city for a fire station if the city elects to do so. And then we will have our new 9.5-acre park that we will construct and give to the city at no cost. And just to give you a very high level of our park, it will have a gateway plaza entry, so it'll be a community space where there can be farmers markets, performances, visual art. We will have a 1-acre inclusive playground. We will have the gymnasium that I mentioned before. We will have 2 lighted softball fields, and those have been analyzed in our environmental document as well, so the neighbors will know that there will be lighting there. And we will have 1 multi-purpose soccer field for either soccer or lacrosse, 6 lighted pickleball courts, 2 dog parks, 1 for large, 1 for small, transit station, bicycling hub, 215 parking spaces, and a restroom. And that's just to give you a little bit of a visual. That's the inclusive park on the left there. That's the eclectic retail that we are building in the center of the park to create a really community space. And then the top is a layout of the community park. And that is all, but we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions from commissioners?
I have a few questions that I wanted to ask. I want to start by thanking staff, the council, and everyone who's here for bringing this to us. The city very much needs housing. As I understand, our role here is really to test the assumptions, so I have a few questions about the assumptions. I want to ask tough questions. That doesn't mean I don't support the project. I just want to ask the tough questions. The first is, as I understand, the absorption is essentially based on how fast the houses can be built. Has anyone done a demand study to make sure they would would be sold? And I know that's almost a laughable question in Davis, where we all know the demand for housing and how much we need more housing in town, but is there something we can point to for the council to say that that's not just that the houses will be built within 5 years, but that they'll be sold that fast?
I think it's probably a question for us. Absolutely. Our a development team, to make the investment we have made in a tentative map, we would not be prudent at all if I told you, no, we just assume it'll be sold. We do a lot of market studies. So even bringing on our condo product and how that was lotted was based on market studies where the market is for condos today. And then what the absorption is, that goes down to what lot sizes we have in our plan. So we have done extensive studies to get to the design to make sure that we can market it. Of course, our absorption schedule is what we're predicting. It's market-based, right? So something could happen. There could be tariffs that, affect construction prices, or we can't get a certain material. And so there are pieces that are out of our control, but we have done a lot of analysis to feel comfortable with the absorption we have, the market, and that the product is hitting where we think the market will be.
I don't feel the need to see your studies, but I think it's real helpful to know they're there, so if anyone or the council wants to see them, they are out there. All right. My second question kind of relates, which is the benefits that are listed have a lot to do with the influx of people and property taxes from the development itself. And I wanted to ask, has there been any analysis of whether any of those benefits are parasitic in that this neighborhood would benefit and other neighborhoods would produce less revenue for the city? Or alternatively, the opposite. Would the building of this neighborhood potentially mean that other neighborhoods in the city are providing more revenue to the city through increased property values or what have you?
And I think that might be more of a question, or I can have Tom come up.
Sure, I can answer at least part of that. You'll notice in the fiscal projections that the project is projected to generate quite a bit of sales tax revenue. The small retail component that you see on the screen right now is not enough to accommodate that level of spending. So we're assuming that it's new local demand created by this new resident population, and that consistent with current trends, the existing retail within the community, along with some incremental amount that could occur on site, will be capturing that expenditure. So those, I think it could be argued that with that increased pool of local demand, other local retail elsewhere within the city of Davis is going to benefit, and then of course the city will benefit from the increased local retail sales tax, including the local sales tax measures that are on top of the standard state sales tax. So, so we have done that. We've assumed that any sales in that on-site would be subsumed within that larger increase in sales created by the sales tax demand. In terms of impacts on property values outside of the project, we have not done analysis of that, so we're assuming this is all, the property tax impacts, they're all on-site, subject to that revenue sharing target, if you will, or historical share that's been negotiated. And we're not looking at changes in property tax revenues, either plus or minus, that might occur elsewhere within the city.
Okay.
And those are the major revenue impacts.
Is there anything that's not in the report that we should be thinking of? So I can imagine a story where increased traffic drops property values in other neighborhoods. I can also imagine a story where access to the gymnasium and the things that are here make it more attractive to be here. Is there anything just that we ought to, as we're doing our due diligence, be thinking about in terms of the effect on other neighborhoods?
Yeah, I think you've mentioned a couple of things. There's always concerns about traffic, and then again there are also a lot of desires within the community for enhanced recreational opportunities. And I think the way it's presented, most of these open space and green belt and park areas would be open to the general public, so not exclusive for the use of the the residents here. So without getting into speculation as to, what the net effect of that is, I think it's, there is potential for pluses, certainly, maybe potential for some negative impacts. But over the years, I don't believe that there has been any real observation that any of these development projects that have made it through the really extensive planning process here in Davis and ultimately been approved have had negative impacts in a way that, there were offsetting the benefits that came with them.
Thanks. That's really what I was looking for. I appreciate that. My next question is about the economic outlook. I am concerned about the coming year in terms of both inflation and slowed growth. We're seeing the effect of tariffs. We're seeing reduced government spending with a particular impact on the university. There's a potential for an AI technology bust. And so I wanted to ask, if we experience over the next, say, couple years, a recession along the lines of the 2001 internet, crash, coupled with higher inflation than we're used to. So if we have that sort of scenario over the next 2-3 years, and then things even out, because we were talking about having houses online by about 2029, is there anything that we ought to be thinking about in the case of economic headwinds where there's a risk to the city's budget, where there are outlays the city is committing now for this project that would harm us if there's economic problems? And the other question I'd have is there a risk to the project, the timelines, or anything like that we ought to be thinking about?
The applicants might want to speak more to this, but I would just say that absolutely development and this kind of large-scale development is highly risky. There are so many things that can affect it that could be unexpected or unanticipated. And I think the most likely scenario that there's some kind of a catastrophic, set of factors that come to bear that you've described is the project would get delayed and it would not be possible to go forward under those kinds of conditions. If the economy falls apart, property values collapse, what typically happens is the costs do not decline. And so the project becomes unfeasible, and then it just has to wait until conditions improve. So I think once the conditions improve, then you're back to looking at a situation where it can go forward and maybe have similar impacts to what we've projected here. So we're very much looking at a kind of a slice in time, a point in time based on what we can see today, how we think it might extend out into the future. We purposely try to align both the inflation rates and for revenues and the inflation rates for expenditures as much as possible so that we're not, those things usually work together over time to kind of even out, with the exception of this accelerated personnel cost component that city staff have identified over the near to midterm. So we have that factored in. But I think just as a general bit of awareness, there's no guarantees on any of this, right? We do the fiscal analysis today, and if the project is to be approved, there's nothing that guarantees that all of these projections will turn out the way we've projected them. So we've tried to be conservative from the city standpoint in terms of if we had a decision to make about an assumption on costs, we try to err a little bit on the high side. If we have to make a decision about an assumption that affects revenues, we try to be erring on the side of lower revenues so that we feel that this is a reasonably conservative estimate of how this project could create fiscal impacts for the city over time. Hopefully, it'll do much better than that if it is approved and developed. But without knowing all the things that could happen, we try to make it reasonably conservative from the city standpoint of long-term fiscal planning.
And There was one large expenditure we talked about, just the fire station. Would we be able to delay the building of the fire station until we're sure that the development is going forward?
Commissioner Sabata, sorry, I'm going to stop you 1 second, because the clarified questions are sort of leading into discussion, which is totally natural.
Sure.
I'm thinking we can pause for a second and
Sure.
see if there's public comment, and then we'll come back to discussion.
Got
So yes, if there's any public comment right now, I'd like to invite.
You just said the magic words, fire station. That's what I'm here to talk about. My name is Dan Carson, for the new members. I'm a former Davis City Council member. I served on your predecessor commission as a member and as chair before I went to council. I'm retired from public service, but I am an occasional troublemaker on fiscal issues. And to answer your question, this city right now is in dire fiscal trouble right now. The city's own 20-year general fund forecast shows our financial condition dramatically declining and us having a zero reserve within just a few years unless the council takes serious action to help address this, even though we just passed the sales tax increase last year, which I supported. That's why the fire station issue is so important right now. These professionals here do excellent work, but the staff has directed them to include in their fiscal analyses the 3 versions for this one, the 3 versions that they did previously for Village Farms, that they were supposed to assume that there would be a 4th fire station built at one location or the other. When I was on council in 2018, however, we received an analysis with extensive computer modeling from one of the foremost experts in the country on deployment of fire resources. They told the city council I was sitting on that if we move 2 outdated fire stations to new locations after they wear out, and keep the downtown station where it is essentially, we could get away with 3 fire stations as we now have them. We wouldn't need to build a 4th station as is assumed in these reports. And the city could avoid altogether that $3.5 million a year additional cost plus growing at a time when, of course, as I just told you, we have serious, serious financial problems to face. The really good news is, and we've been raising this issue in regard to both projects, early this morning, about 1 o'clock, I think it was, council showed they have an open mind on this issue, and they want to explore 3 or 4. They'd make a decision, it was a workshop, nobody passed any motions, but they made it clear, I think to staff and to everyone in the room, that they want to look at this afresh and figure out what's the right path to do. I am supportive of both of these housing projects. I've been an advocate, I've been involved in every ballot campaign involving housing for about the last decade around here in a very direct way. And if you produce that analysis that shows 3 stations and not a 4th, that $3.5 million cost that is being attributed in whole or in part to this project pretty much goes away. There will still be some additional fire service costs attributed to it, even without that, just on the basis of the additional population that this project would bring to our community. But it would be a very different picture. And trust me when I tell you from these campaigns, they're going to pick out that negative $5 million for this project and trumpet that over and over and over again. And the way to refute that is if we have an analysis that shows 3 stations and that produces a very different financial picture, I think that helps this project to succeed.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more public comments, That's for some questions and discussion.
Sure. The question I had about the fire station was, is there a scenario where the city commits to the fire station and then the development doesn't go forward? Or is, because as we said, perhaps economic problems would lead to a delay of the development. We're stuck paying for a fire station, but we don't have the development. Is that a risk we ought to be considering?
City staff may want to jump in. I would just say, one risk in the scenario we've laid out is that development proceeds, you hit that year 2, the station is built, it is occupied, staffed and put into operation. If the development were to stall out for some reason, and the rest of the development and the tax base that it would bring along with it didn't occur, then that could create some deterioration in the fiscal situation there.
That's the question I had. I have just a couple more just smaller questions, detailed questions, and I'm looking at the EPS report, which is the peer report. So EPS mentioned an upside sensitivity. I'm on the last page of it. There's an upside sensitivity analysis which could contemplate a higher turnover rate, and I wanted just to understand. Does a higher turnover rate help the city's finances? Is that an upside?
It would marginally, because of the effect of Proposition 13, where the property tax assessments can only go up 2% per year if the property isn't sold or improved. You can have this lagging of the assessed value relative to the inflation rate for costs and so forth. So if the properties turn over quicker, there's less of that lagging effect. So it would have a marginal increase on the property tax revenues, and then also on property tax in lieu of VLF, and also on the property transfer tax revenues. So not a game changer, not something to fundamentally change the outcomes, but yes, it could improve the situation if the turnover was quicker.
The other paragraph I just simply didn't understand was about the retail assumptions. It seemed to suggest that EPS would have done the retail assumptions differently from BAE, and I didn't understand what the difference was, and I'm not sure I need to. My question is this something I need to worry about?
Yeah, I don't think it's something you need to worry about, but there are different methodologies, and if the analysis were done such that it was based not on current per capita spending levels, but instead looking at the household incomes of the households who would live in the project, their propensity to spend on retail, potential to capture that locally, you might come up with a different number. I don't know that I would say it would be greater or less than what we did, but I think it would be in the same range as what we've done.
I appreciate that, thanks. And I don't have any further questions.
Anyone else?
This question is for Matt. So did BAA determine the 3 scenarios, or did the city decide those scenarios? And regardless of your answer, it seems like there could be hundreds of scenarios. How were those 3 determined, and are they reasonable?
I think they're reasonable based on the range of possibility here. We had discussion with city staff about how to approach this analysis. I think it was my suggestion that we look at these different methods to kind of bookend what the cost impacts to the city might be. The applicant, they have their feelings about the impracticality of the high cost allocation scenario, saying the entire cost of the fire station would be burdened on just this project. We get into it in the memo a little bit to acknowledge that it's probably not a fair characterization, if you will, given that there's an existing need for improved fire response, fire and EMS response within the northern part of the city that exists, regardless of whether Village Farms and or Willow Grove proceeds. So it doesn't seem quite right to say, well, we want to allocate the whole cost of this project, or of the new fire station to the project. At the same time, the money has to come from somewhere. And so taking a step back from it of, you know, what is the city's fiscal situation? Where does the money come from? This would be a new development that generates new revenues, it generates new service costs. A fire station comes along, the city has to figure out how to pay for the operation of that. So that is a high cost allocation. These other two were simply methods to do more of a pro rata cost allocation that acknowledges that there's benefits to this new station throughout the city, not just in one of these two new development projects. And we just worked through that from a technical standpoint and found that, in fact, the medium and the low are very close to each other because of that just very marginal impact of adding a few more housing units elsewhere within the city to that existing base plus the project. So,
Are there significant scenarios that are not included that we should consider?
well, former council member Carson's scenario sounds great. If there is an ability to work out a situation where you're trading in perpetuity a 2025-26 $3.5 million cost for some one-time increases in capital costs to do a relocation of a fire station or two, that's probably a benefit to the entire city. I live in Davis. I love the idea of freeing up revenues to do other things that people in the community would like to see happen with available monies. So we haven't analyzed that. It could be very interesting to do it. I think intuitively we can do the math and say, if you were to remove the full $3.5 million from the high cost scenario, that would put you into a fiscal surplus situation. If you were to remove the cost sharing from the mid and low cost, I think that's also puts you into fiscal surplus territory with those ones. So if there's a way to do it, and this isn't speaking to any of the operational considerations that the department has or other practical things that would need to be taken into account, it seems like it could be a win-win for the projects, for the general city budget, and so forth.
So just to confirm, all three scenarios assume the fourth fire station goes into operation?
Correct.
Okay. All right, my other question is just to confirm what things are included in the assumptions and what are not. So road maintenance, is that included? Yes. So the effect on not only traffic signals and things, but wear and tear on the streets?
Within the project.
I thought that was not owned by the city.
There are some internal circulation areas that would be associated with the multifamily, as I understand it, that would be maintained by the homeowners association. But that backbone network of roads that you saw on the subdivision map, I believe most of that would be publicly owned, publicly maintained roadway.
Okay, so no impact on existing city streets for additional traffic from that community?
Not directly.
Is that normal in this kind of a scenario?
Yes, I'd say so. It'd be very hard to quantify some kind of marginal increase in maintenance costs for other roadway network. It's already being maintained to some extent anyway, within the rest of the city. If there was something like a brand new signalized intersection off-site, sometimes we'll consider that as an additional maintenance cost associated with the project.
But you said it is normal to include that as a cost of the new development.
Not uncommon to do that.
Okay. All right. How about additional police services?
We have factored in, again, on an average cost per DOE basis, an increase in police service costs.
Okay, I know it isn't the city, but about additional schools, costs for schools?
That is not considered in this analysis because it's outside the city general fund.
Okay, has the question for city staff, has the school district been involved in this discussion?
They haven't been involved in the fiscal aspects of the project. They've been much more interested in the possible housing options. But yes, we do communicate with the school district and have been in discussions with them, keeping them informed. I assume that the applicants have also had conversations that they get into that directly.
And Commissioner, I would also just add to Commissioner Harper. I was just going to respond to your question as well. I could tell you couldn't tell where that voice was coming from. I've seen that look before. Also, the school district also, just in terms of some of the earlier questions around school enrollment and the need for housing, the school does a very extensive analysis on a regular basis regarding anticipated school district enrollment. And in the recent, I'd say past 18 months or so, the school district has been doing a very considerable public outreach campaign to make sure that individuals throughout the community are aware of our very significant declining enrollment in the Davis Joint Unified School District. It's been declining for 15 years. It's not a new thing, but the rate at which it is declining is increasing and is expected to increase. So they've done a lot of analysis and have been trying to educate the community about the need to, their concerns related to the potential school closures. So that's been a very active discussion as well.
Okay, yes, thank you.
And if I may, just to answer on that, yes, we've met with Superintendent Best and we've been meeting with the school district. And to each of the ones you mentioned, traffic, public facilities, and public safety, and schools, we will be paying mitigation impact fees. So we will be, I don't think it's in the FIA, but we will be, so those fees are intended to mitigate the effects of new development, and those are either paid on a per square footage basis for the homes or a per building permit, but all three of those have fees that will be paid.
So why is that not in the FIA?
Those are one-time capital costs that are not addressed through the general fund. So the impact fees will pay for things such as roadway improvements, other public facility improvements. Those are typically paid for outside of the general fund, so we're not addressing those one-time costs, and these are also one-time revenues that Bree's talking about as far as paying the fees one time and then they're done.
And public safety?
That would be for something such as a expanded or improved fire station, or expanded or
So not additional officer or something like that for a big
the
increase in the city?
fiscal analysis has the operation and maintenance costs associated with expanded police, expanded fire, but not the cost of building buildings.
Okay, all right. And the last part of that question then is, we're getting land and building donated as part of this project to the city. Is that factored into the FIA?
No, it's not.
There is a financial benefit. I know there's also a financial burden, but it seems like we've calculated the financial burden without necessarily including the financial benefit.
We have not quantified the value of any of these dedications to the city. Again, one-time benefits that have value, certainly, but not something that plays into the general fund.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions? We start with Commissioner Davis.
So just one question for me, but I think I asked this prior to when we were talking about on a prior meeting, but the assumed 50-50 city-county property tax split, I think you mentioned that that was very reasonable too, but I guess one thing I'm not so clear on has the county ever negotiated a larger share than the 50 in like other cities or anything like that?
If you get into other cities, other jurisdictions, it's all over the map. With the city of Davis, I know that there, again, recent negotiations have ended up at that 50-50, but Earlier ones were not necessarily at that same level, and I couldn't say at the moment if they were greater or lesser.
Okay, thank you. I guess maybe it would be helpful to understand what like a 45-55, or if that's something that maybe the county has done in cities in Yolo County potentially, but if that's not really something that's happened and it's kind of well understood that this is commonplace, then never mind.
If I can just add, it's a bit of a difficult comparison to make the tax shares and the tax structure for even cities within Yolo County is vastly different. And so we would need to go back and look, I would say more like what would be typical for now, and I think that's what Matt had tried to do. The more recent agreements have been 50-50. We'd have to go back and look further and see what the most recent non-50-50 was.
One thing to note is that I mentioned that in this particular area, there's about just a little under 22% of the ad valorem tax is available for sharing. That can also vary even within different locations on the periphery of Davis. So that is a consideration for the county in terms of what they have now and what they can give up and what they will feel they need in order to provide services moving forward, because they'll still provide countywide services to an annexed area. So it really is very situation specific.
Got it, thank you.
That was a great intro to my question, which was about the revenue sharing agreements as well. So the most recent ones the cities negotiated, are those negotiated once a proposed development is headed to the ballot, or are they negotiated in advance of that? I'm guessing the last one you had was, God, I already forgot the name of the development on the Mace Curve that was before the voters a few years ago.
So you may be referring to the DISC project?
Yeah, DISC, that's it.
It varies in terms of the timeline, but generally we get into the tax share discussions once we know that something is going to the ballot.
Okay. And then is it just property tax that's part of these revenue sharing agreements, or are there other taxes that are, and I'm assuming it's mostly property taxes overwhelmingly? How would you characterize that?
I think that's right. That the primary focus is property taxes because of the way that works, where there's an allocation currently to the county, and that needs to be divvied up, and the annexation proceedings in state law say you've got to negotiate that and present that to the LAFCO. With those discussions, all kinds of things get put into the mix. So for some previous projects, there were discussions about funding for the library in South Davis and various other things, and sales tax revenues can come into play. I mean, there's potential for a lot of things to be sort of tied to that agreement, but property tax is really the main one.
Okay. And I'm probably going to have a hard time wording this question, but the revenue sharing component of the analysis you did, is that most of the analysis? I mean, is that most of the fiscal impact, or is it just a small portion? Or I'm just trying to get a feel for how significant those revenue sharing agreements are in terms of, you know, what you're analyzing and the...
Sure. Yeah, in the overall fiscal analysis, property tax revenue is one of the biggest, alongside sales tax revenue. Now in Davis with Measure Q and our prior local sales tax add-on, sales tax is becoming a much bigger deal than it was previously, and maybe a bigger deal than it is in some other communities. So that's a bigger component, but property tax is still quite important. It does not, that revenue sharing agreement does not affect the property tax in lieu of vehicle license fees, which is also a significant revenue source for the city, so that's a good thing. I think that we don't have to worry about the county's position on that one. That's one where it's actually a net gain to both the city and the county when there's an annexation, because the county continues to get the same ILVLF they would have received, and then the city gets a new share for itself. So there's a local benefit there, I would say, in terms of annexing versus having the property develop outside the city in an unincorporated area. But property tax and the effect of the revenue sharing agreement, I would say, is a significant consideration in the fiscal analysis.
And finally, are sales taxes ever factored into those revenue sharing agreements? Like, does the city share sales tax revenue with the county? Or is it just a question of we're trying to get to a certain number and we're going to give it to them, so to speak?
Yeah.
This much through sales tax, this much through property tax, maybe there's other taxes as well that are shared.
I would say that sales tax revenues tend to come into the picture more when there's an area that either has existing sales tax generation on it that's going to be annexed, or when it's an area that is perceived to be a sales tax opportunity to the county if it were not annexed to the city. So they kind of say, hey, we're losing an opportunity here. We want to talk about maybe sharing in the benefit of this eventually developing as retail. I don't think we've seen that in Davis, but we did see the county negotiate an agreement to get some sales tax sharing with the city of Woodland.
Makes sense. Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions, and apologies if some of them have been covered in the commission before, but I'm new, as you all know. So the first is around assumptions. So I was struck by the 16.9% increase between Village Farms and Willow Grove. I just wanted to understand a little bit better what's driving that. And, these projects are very close together, so if one of them is right, how does it affect the other, and how do we account for that big increase?
Okay. Staff may want to add on to it. My understanding is that the change in general fund expenditures between 24-25 and 25-26 was primarily driven by renegotiation of various city employee group contracts that brought wages up to their peer median levels, I think was the benchmark that's being targeted. So that was the main driver of that year-to-year increase in the cost.
Okay, got it. And then the other question is around retail. So we have, I would say, as a citizen, it feels like we're having big changes in our retail environment, some in a good way and some in a bad way. And I'm curious what kinds of assumptions are behind the retail and sales tax generation.
For the retail sales tax generation assumption, we have what's known, which is the rate of sales tax and how much of that goes to the city of Davis as opposed to going off to the state or some other entities. But then the question is how much new taxable retail sales will occur within the city. And we outline in the methodology that we're looking at existing per capita sales tax levels, and we're assuming that on average, the new households, new population within the development are going to generate sales tax revenues at a similar level, and the city will capture those new sales tax revenues accordingly.
And what year was that based on?
I believe we were able to get that on data up till at least mid-2025. So it would not reflect, for example, what's happening in the Davis collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, probably mid-2024 and not 2025.
Got it.
there is a bit of a lag in the sales tax data.
Yeah. And I think also kind of on the downside, we've had some negative changes in downtown that I would imagine might affect some of that as well. So just a note there. And then to echo some of the commissioners, the comments around some of the positive things that might not be reflected. There's the donation of the property, but also the district is doing, I think, a really nice job communicating the positive impact to the district. I get why those are segmented in terms of the way we're talking about fiscal impact, but the fiscal impact to the district because of average daily attendance is big. So I think as we think about communicating fiscal impact to the community, finding ways to combine those two things would really benefit this project. And then my last question, this is a question, we haven't talked yet about the community facility district. And I just have questions about how that works, what the mechanics are around building a system like that.
So a community facilities district is one way that maintenance, in this case, could be funded. You could also use a community facilities district to fund infrastructure. In Davis, we have a few community facilities districts that fund infrastructure, but we haven't historically done a lot with maintenance CFDs. So what happens in the case of a CFD is that the property owners have to vote in favor of a CFD. You would typically, when in a development project like this, do that or ask that question at the point, well, not when the development is all built out, but when you have maybe one owner that you're dealing with or just a few owners. So you put that into place, and then you spell out in that vote what the revenue that's going to be generated, what it's going to pay for. And so it operates very similar to, we also mentioned in the staff report, a landscape and lighting district, where you're paying a set amount generally through your property bill, and that amount is intended and dedicated and required to go for the purposes that are spelled out in the documents that create the district. Are those the questions that you're asking?
So if property owners don't vote for it, though, then the city just has to pay for it out of the general fund?
The city would have to pay for costs if there were maintenance costs or other types of costs for services. But in this type of a situation, you would set up that CFD as part of the development at the beginning of the process. So the property owner is the applicant.
I see. Okay, got it.
And that's what I was going to add, if it's okay. And it's a DA term, and it's routine in every jurisdiction. In my past experience is more government-based, but it's routine. We're obligated to form it. The city works with us to do it. The city prepares all the accounting, the replacement costs, everything to determine what it is. Then it's called a landowner vote. And our vote is to comply with our DA, comply with our obligation, and we vote yes.
Can I just ask one more follow-up question on that? Who's going to decide which of the three mechanisms that were presented to us would be elected between the LLMD, the CFD, or the Conservancy or Trust?
Essentially the city council, but it is they do obviously work with the applicant on it, but the negotiation in that way.
I just have just a follow-up. So on the sales tax revenue, I guess there are different kinds of units that are going to be available within this development. And so spending profile, I imagine, for different people within those units would be different. And is that baked into those assumptions too?
It's assumed that the housing units, kind of that overall blend within the project would be kind of average relative to the existing city. So that's what's baked into it.
Thank you.
one of the recommendation in the agenda indicates feedback on potential funding mechanisms, what Commissioner Mike, our newest commissioner, just discussed a moment ago. I'm having a hard time grappling with that. Mostly I'm thinking, I don't know. I mean, what is that a critical component of what we should be opining on here to the council? Maybe other commissioners have stronger feelings about this, but to me it just looks like, well, it's going to get paid for by the developers, so I don't really care.
So if you don't have strong feelings, that's absolutely fine. Between among the different options, it's probably a more important recommendation or information to pass on to the council. Do you think it's important that there be a funding mechanism? And you can say you don't, you're ambivalent about which kind, but that there should be one. And if you had any specifics on that, I think that would be helpful information to the city council. I don't know if Vice Mayor Neville has any other thoughts on that, but that's the kind of information that would be helpful to them and presumably the Planning Commission as well.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, I have a couple. I guess staying on the topic of the CFDs, is it pretty common for most development in the state now to include a CFD?
Yes, is a short answer.
Okay.
I can say our firm doesn't represent a single significant project that doesn't have a CFD.
Okay. So if I understand the staff report correctly, it sounds like if there's any resistance to establishing a CFD, it's because we want to ensure like equal tax burden on all the citizens in Davis. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you live in one neighborhood and you go and you visit your friend in another neighborhood, maybe they don't have a CFD that they have to pay for and you do, yet you live in the same place and you feel like you get the same types of services. So that can be a frustration among community members. The added tax burden can also be frustrating when community members, come to the ballot to vote on something else that the city or the school district may have. So it is something to consider, but I would say that in our current fiscal situation, not just the city of Davis, but actually really anywhere throughout the state, these are very common mechanisms to provide for the services that they're trying to cover.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be curious if other commissioners have thoughts on this, because I do think it seems to be like a really common way to make sure that ongoing expenses for the new developments are covered without burdening like already heavily burdened general fund. And I definitely respect the viewpoint that we want to equalize tax burden throughout the city, but I think it's also worth considering that a lot of the housing that's been developed in the city was pre-Prop 13, and we now live in a post-Prop 13 world where, it's sort of a painful conclusion that, we have to be able to generate revenue. So yeah, if anyone has thoughts on that, please.
I'd absolutely like to weigh on that as well. It did strike me as distinctly inequitable when you have a lot of homeowners paying such low property taxes. So you come in, you buy these houses, they're at a high property tax rate, and then you also have the additional amount for the CFD. Related though, I would like to know what the amount is that we're talking that would be assessed for the new homeowners, roughly.
I don't have that information. If that is something that is important to the commission, we could at what, for example, the cannery has a CFD and look and see what they pay and try to give an idea.
Yeah, I'd just love to know a ballpark. I don't have a sense of if it's hundreds or thousands or what we're talking about.
Can I ask a follow-up question, which is table 17 of the longest document we got has the park and open space maintenance expenditures. Is that what would be covered by the CFD? And is one way to think of it is take that and divide it by 1,200 houses?
Okay. Yeah, so what that is the, I'm sorry, that's the projected cost of maintaining that 19.5 acre park once the city takes control of it and assumes the maintenance responsibility. So starting out about $600,000 a year and then inflating over time. That is factored into that overall net fiscal general fund fiscal impact. So we're assuming the general fund covers that piece, but you see all the zeros for the green belts, the urban agricultural transition area. Those are the features that are assumed to be maintained using funding from one of these other mechanisms outside of the general fund.
Another question I had was on table 3, the absorption schedule. If I'm understanding the way absorption works, wouldn't you typically have a higher absorption rate for high density residential units and then the lowest one for low density? Is that not how it normally works?
Not necessarily, but the applicants might want to speak to what their strategy would be for rolling those units out. One of the issues with multifamily is sorry again. One of the issues with multifamily is that you've got to build the building if they're all attached and so forth. You can't do one unit. You've got to kind of do it in chunks. So that's one issue that comes up.
So it's about the building of the units. It's not the rate at which you're selling the units. Is that?
The assumption that's built in here is that these would be getting built, but then they would be getting sold and occupied or rented and occupied within a reasonably short period of time.
Within that 5-year period, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
And to illustrate why it's broken up kind of evenly, or not perfectly evenly, but by the units, is that's our phasing. So if you picture our entire kind of rectangle of a project and you split it down our northern green belt, phase 1 is our eastern edge, and so there we have the condos, and then we have the lower density at the top, and then kind of middle density in the middle. And so that's why it's broken up that way, because then when we go to phase 2, it's going to be a similar breakup. The one exception to that is our affordable site is in the southwest corner and is on the left side, if you call it, of our phasing plan, but we've included that in phase 1 so that the affordable site is actually ready to go before we even start on the other ones. But that's why it's really the way the phasing is done. We'll grade the entire site, but then we'll phase the construction.
I think you may have answered this earlier, but if you can just go over it again for my own understanding. Why are we using, I think the staff report calls it an aggressive absorption rate or absorption schedule? I guess I just want to understand if that's not how it plays out. It seems like it would have a pretty big impact on the fiscal analysis, the fiscal impact.
Yeah, this is the applicant's plan for how they want to build this out, and as I think they addressed earlier, they've done their market analysis and think that they're going to be able to not only build the units but have them sold or occupied in the case of the rental units within that time frame.
And if I can add, I think there was a lot of discussion on market. So market is the one piece we can't control. We think we've analyzed it, we feel comfortable with it, but another piece is feasibility. So when a lot of projects get stalled, it's because you run into a hurdle, something you didn't anticipate, right? You run into something that slows down your development, and you're stalled, and as us kind of living there, we might just see vacant land and think, oh, the developers gave up. Well, no, they might be dealing with a stormwater issue, or they might be dealing with a piping issue. And so part of doing the tentative map now is we're assessing all that feasibility now. So we feel confident on the project that we can build, that we're not gonna run into those hurdles, but we can't control the market. We do our best to analyze it, we feel good about it, but the feasibility part is one thing that gives us the ability to say we can build a project in that time because we know it's there and we've analyzed it and we've built for it.
Thank you. And then on that same schedule for the non-residential absorption schedule, if I'm understanding correctly, in the cannery, there's also like some commercial spaces, and my understanding is there was like a developed nursery last year in 2024, and as I understand it, that's like the first of the commercial space in the cannery that's been bought and developed. And it's been, the cannery was built, 10 years ago? And so I'm curious if this 5-year absorption schedule for the commercial land here doesn't play out in 5 years, how much of an impact is that?
As far as the fiscal model is concerned, it doesn't have a big impact at all. It's a relatively small quantity of non-residential space that's assumed to be generating property taxes, so it has a very minimal effect on the overall property tax generation. And then, as I mentioned earlier, for the retail sales tax generation, which is the other big revenue that you'd associate with the retail space, we're assuming that if that demand doesn't get absorbed in that 5,000 square foot retail area, it'll be captured somewhere else within the city, and I think that's fair to say. People are going to need to do their daily shopping and so forth, and so they'll find where to do that within the city in these other existing establishments. So I don't think that will have a significant impact on the fiscal outcome of this project. The other piece, the gym and the classroom, the daycare center, are not sales tax generators and also not assumed to be property tax generators.
And if I could just add, I think that was part of the applicant's consideration too, in terms of the retail, to do what they feel is feasible and not like, swing for a home run but they can speak to the retail part of it. But again, it's fairly small, kind of eclectic neighborhood serving type of thing.
Thank you so much.
And I do have somewhat of an answer to your question about the amounts for CFDs. So just to use cannery as an example, when the CFD was created, it was based on square footage for the homes, not the lots, but the homes. And the amounts ranged from $475, that's an annual amount on the property tax bill, up to about $2,100. So a wide variation, again, based on size of home in that particular instance. So I don't know if that helps or makes it more confusing. It's a pretty big variation, but you get the idea.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion, questions, points to make? I don't know, the easiest way to do this would be to provide feedback for City Council or for the Planning Commission. We can do it via a motion, if anyone has one, to recommend a certain action, or we could just note sort of the questions and concerns we had and pass those along. Is that the way to do it? So yeah, I don't know if is there any suggestions or motions on the table?
I mean, I was thinking maybe passing along the questions and concerns, but I don't know if Donna can kind of like move that closer to yourself. So
Well, it's really your prerogative how you do this. I find motions helpful because they really do formalize and show us what the majority thought. And really, as you noted earlier, you're being asked to weigh in on whether you think the assumptions were reasonable or not. So a possibility is to say, to have a motion which simply indicates that you generally found, or didn't find, that's your call, the assumptions reasonable, but note the following, some concerns or observations, something like that I think is very helpful. And for me on council, the more I understand really what the concern was, rather than a bullet point that says CFD, and then I get it and say, what does that mean? So, thank you. And if you have questions, I'm happy to respond. Like, very much your prerogative.
Okay.
Would it be worth revisiting what we did with Village Farms project back in April?
I think we had a motion to like also consider certain questions we had, right, for Village Farms.
It was like a slew of stuff.
Yeah, it was a long list of things, yeah. I mean, I think it's we can look at this as a separate project personally, since the other commissioners, I think it's mostly new commissioners now, a lot has changed, so we can, yeah. Commissioners.
Is it helpful if we just start suggesting things that might be included as concerns or observations?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Well, why don't I give 3?
Okay.
One is, I would observe the absorption is driven seemingly entirely by how fast the houses can be built, on the assumption that they will sell very quickly after. And as Councilmember Neville pointed out, the school district has done a lot of work on pointing out that there is a lot of demand for housing. So that would be a direction to look at, is whether that is reasonable or not. But that's one observation. The next is, the second one is the fire station is obviously very, very important in this consideration. And the timing of when would fire station expenditures come online versus the revenues that we get from the development. If the development is delayed, but the fire station is built, that has a pretty significant effect on the general fund. Actually, I combined 2 of them, so I only have 2. Thanks.
Can I add to the fire station? The peer review suggested the elimination of option 1C, and that might be something that I would recommend looking into. I also, this issue of being able to meet the demand with 3 stations instead of adding a 4th seems like something that should be looked at from a fiscal perspective.
Could I just respond to that?
Yeah.
I agree with the premise that 1C is completely unfair. I also found it really helpful to have those numbers. Just looking at the table that went with 1C helped me understand how this all comes together, even though, again, the idea that this development is the reason we would potentially need a 4th fire station doesn't seem right. But that table helped me understand what's happening. So I'll just keep that as a contrasting view.
Fair enough. Okay. I also heard in a few of the questions sort of concerns about having a more precise number for the revenue sharing allocation to the extent possible, to like do more research on that rather than just using a 50-50 assumption. Is that right? Okay. So I'll take a shot at this. So I propose a motion to recommend that we see the assumptions as reasonable, noting a couple concerns or a couple areas of additional consideration. One being that we consider or suggest to council that they consider looking into an independent absorption study, just because it has such a big impact on the fiscal impact, and sort of the aggressive schedule is just something that's a little concerning. 2, to consider a scenario in which we relocate the existing fire station to avoid those additional ongoing costs, as well as to consider the impact of if there's a timing delay on development versus the creation of the fire station and the impact on our fiscal situation then. And 3, to note that we have a concern about the revenue sharing allocation being assumed at 50-50, and suggesting that they look into or research to come up with a more accurate number to the extent possible. I know that was very long-winded, but.
That's very helpful, and I'd like to suggest that we weigh in on the Community Facilities District as saying that we are not, we don't care which of the scenarios, but one of the scenarios needs to be adopted so that we can finance those open space areas.
Sorry, can you clarify to one of the scenarios has
One of the scenarios of the lighting and landscaping the communities
should include the
should be included
with
in
a
the-
CFD or some
Yeah.
kind of funding.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd also like to suggest that that we include, I think as Commissioner Heather was saying, is that we include the benefits. So part of this project is going to be dependent upon getting the citizens to vote yes on it, and I don't see how they can vote yes on it without having the full benefit of the benefit to the community. And so that's the school district, it's the city, it is the full city, it's not just the general fund. As a resident, I don't care whether it's general fund or not. I, as a CPA, care, but I don't care as a voting resident. So the effect on the enterprise funds, the effect of having capital assets, both the receipt of the capital assets, which has some financial benefit, and the maintenance of those capital assets once you own them. Anyway, we're taking a piece, maybe a very important piece of this financial picture, but we don't have the whole picture. I would recommend that we would include that.
Just, I think Heather mentioned this, and but kind of when considering financing mechanisms, look into that equitable distribution piece. I think would be kind of just the additional piece that I'd like.
As part of the recommendation to look at the scenario with the CFD?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Can you talk about that a little bit more, Commissioner Beidel? I'm not sure I follow what you mean when you say equitable.
I think the earlier comments were just around that, for instance, with the CFD, when the burden is placed maybe on folks who are within this particular community, but, you know, maybe these are services that are used by the city, like city residents at large, it can feel a little bit inequitable, especially as maybe there are different levels of property tax payment and all sorts of things across the city, but everyone's using the same services. I don't know if Heather, I'm capturing that correctly, but maybe there's some way to distribute some of those costs. I don't know if that works within the city. I mean, I don't really know how all of that is structured, but I think if there's some consideration towards how costs like that can be more equitable, that should be something that's considered.
Yeah, I'll just add some specificity too, that if you are an older homeowner in an older home, you pay a lower tax rate and don't pay for landscaping and lighting. So these newer homeowners pay a higher tax rate and then the additional cost of the CFD, which has equity considerations.
Okay, I understand that. I don't agree with it, but I understand it, so thank you. You've got a bear of emotion there, and I am going to ask you to repeat it because I won't vote on something unless I clearly understand what it says. So, but I wonder if on the fire station, it might be simplified just to merely challenge the assumption about the fourth fire station. I don't know how the other commissioners feel, but we don't need to solve that problem, but I think if we can put forth a voice that, hey, do we really need a fourth fire station? It sounds like the city council is already traveling down that path, and I don't think necessarily there needs to be a fire station on this project site. I understand that the developer's offering to make land available for it, and I was just concerned that that might be part of the suggestion you were making and in the motion you made. I don't feel equipped to opine on that, but I feel pretty strongly that this assumption about a fourth fire station, I feel it's important to push back against that a bit. I would be interested in sending that message forth to council.
Okay, understood. I think that's a consensus. Okay, so if there's no other additions, I will try this again. Okay, so I think to reiterate the motion with the friendly amendments is that our input to City Council and to the Planning Commission is that we generally see these assumptions in the fiscal impact analysis as reasonable, but with wanting to call out a couple concerns or considerations. The first being to push back on the assumption that we need a fourth fire station and consider a scenario in which we relocate one of the existing ones to avoid the additional ongoing costs. And to look particularly at the impacts of if the timing is off, if the development is delayed, but the fire station is built. Second, to consider getting an independent absorption study to ensure that the aggressive absorption schedule that we see here is something that the city is comfortable with, given how much of an impact it has on the fiscal analysis. Third is to call out that we have a concern about the revenue sharing agreement because it's a 50-50 assumption, but that's not really based on any research or data, and because it has such a big impact, to do more research on a more precise number to the extent possible. The fourth is to consider a scenario in which we adopt a CFD, and in addition, look at the sort of equitable impact that has on the city at large. And finally, to consider the other community benefits that the impact of the development has on the city that are not specifically named in the fiscal impact analysis, such as the donated properties, is that right?
And the ADA, the student funding per student in the district.
Yes.
And the impact on the utilities.
Impact on utilities, thank you.
I have just, that was great, good job. I just have, the revision I might make to the piece about the CFD is to add an option into the set of options being considered that spreads the cost around the city instead of concentrating it within a CFD. So not necessarily, I'm not sure all of us agree that there should be a CFD, so including a non-CFD option.
Okay, I understand.
And I can ask a question, because what I heard in terms of the conversation was that you were ambivalent on the funding mechanism type. CFD is a particular type.
Yes.
So
thank you.
I'm thinking I think what you wanted to say was that you are interested in a financing mechanism for the open space areas as is outlined in the staff report, not weighing in on a specific type, but you do have concerns about the equity issues. So therefore, it could be specific to that neighborhood or something larger. Does that capture what you think you said? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
And then the fifth item, looking at the full benefit, what I was hearing was the analysis in front of you is really the city's general fund. And so you're interested in the non-general fund and in some cases the non-city pieces. So the school district, the enterprise funds, and the capital assets were the three that I heard. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yes.
A question, should we weigh in on the three scenarios? Should we tell them which of them that we think is the better of the three?
I mean, I think if there's a consensus and we have a strong feeling on it, we can. I don't think.
Are you talking about the financing for CFD or the fire station?
No, the three main scenarios of that are in the study.
Well, I think we don't have consensus that we should even use any of those three.
Can you clarify what you're talking about? Because I'm confused about.
Okay, so the three main scenarios, right? A, B, and C, the low cost, the low cost, the medium cost, and the fire station, all into the one community were the three main scenarios. And so I have a feeling on it. I don't know if we all have the same feeling on it, and I don't know if it matters because, yeah, we've asked for some different kinds of analysis, but so it's just a question of should we weigh in on that?
Do you want to share what your thought is on it?
Well-
We can see if we all agree.
So my feeling is that, and everybody said this, that option C is unrealistic, and so we're not recommending that. My feeling is that option B, where we're spreading the cost, including some expected future development in a city that doesn't have much development and doesn't have very much, it's not very easy to get development, it wouldn't seem to be a very conservative estimate, and therefore I would pick of those three scenarios.
But this has to do with the fire station solely.
Well, it includes the scenario, all of the three scenarios include the cost of a fourth fire station, so you're absolutely right.
Right.
It does.
And if the motion already says we're challenging the assumption about a fourth fire station, is that sufficient, or does there need to be more than that?
That is my question. I don't.
So in choosing between A and B, there's a question I didn't ask, and now we're in discussion, which was, in B, the difference between A and B is B takes into account future development. And was B only the development that's already on the table, like village homes, or is it future hypothetical development? I realize now I don't understand whether B was either of those. So does anyone on the commission understand the difference between A and B to that level?
I think we heard an answer that says that it includes hypothetical future development.
Okay. Is that something we need to ask another clarifying question about to make sure we understand them well enough, or do we understand them well enough?
I mean, I personally think at this point, since we're challenging the three scenarios altogether, since they all include a fire station, it's sort of moot to choose between A and B. But I'm open to other opinions on that if you feel challenging. Okay.
And I'll just add for you, like, you don't have to put all of this into one motion. You can break it out if that would be easier, or if there's, differing opinions on parts of what you've already put together.
Fair enough. Maybe we start with that one and see if there's a second.
What? Start with what?
The motion that I read earlier.
Oh.
The whole thing.
I have one more question before we do that.
Yeah.
So we saw affordable housing listed, and it's obviously, we had that big meeting last month about affordable housing. Do we know if the affordable housing as defined by the applicant is the same as the affordable housing as defined by the city in meeting our needs?
That's a fair question.
So the short answer is yes, the applicant will be providing a program for affordable housing that meets the city's needs. We can make that assumption.
And what percentage of our needs is met by that development?
That's a little bit of a harder question to answer.
A big number or a small percentage?
The percentage is required by code. So.
It meets the percentages as required by code?
Well, it's not.
Yeah, meet or exceed. I mean, they have a requirement to provide a certain amount, a certain number, a certain type, so they will need to do that.
Oh, but it doesn't, you're not saying it meets our requirement as a city to meet the state's.
It contributes.
It contributes. I don't know that we'll ever be able to fully meet all of the need that's out there.
Well, I would like to second the motion that you made with all the items that you listed.
Okay. So we have a second discussion? Further discussion?
I like everything in the motion. I'm having a problem with the financing for, let me get the term right, the non-parks, open space, and I just had it here on my screen. When we talk about a landscape and lighting district or a community facilities district, that's to fund, someone help me out here, what part of the project is that funding? It's the open space and...
Yeah, it's the open space. It's up.
I thought there was
Trails
another
and
part of
Yeah,
the
trails
project that it
and
was
greenbelt.
funding, not just the open space. Okay, we'll call it the open space. I'm just having a hard time with suggesting that, look, if this project didn't develop, there wouldn't be a need for any of those things. And I'm having a hard time suggesting that we should assign the cost for those community-wide. So that part of it I don't like. I probably would vote against the motion. If we could move that into a different motion, I would love it. I like everything else in the motion that you made and that we've added to around the table here.
And I agree with that only because a big part of this project is going to be whether the citizens vote yes on it or not. And for the citizens that exist to say, I'm going to pay more for that development to come into my city, I don't see it going that direction. So I agree.
I guess maybe my understanding of the motion was that it would be something that is considered, not that it is required or included, but that it is a part of the gamut of considerations that are put towards the city council.
Correct. I think the way that I phrased it was that we were just asked City Council and the Planning Commission to consider as part of the package of different scenarios, or considering one scenario in which we include a CFD or something.
A citywide distribution. Yeah, something that's equity.
Yeah, if that helps. If not, we can remove that and consider it separately.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Okay. So, is there any further discussion, or should I call for a vote?
Forgive me. Can you repeat the motion, please?
I'll repeat it like a shorter version of it, but
Oh, that's even better, because that I think will be
I think
easier
I'm
to
guessing
digest
they've
as it
written it.
moves its way through from here to the council.
sure. Okay, so the motion will be to provide input to the City Council and Planning Commission that we think the assumptions made in the fiscal analysis are reasonable with, I'm sorry?
Sorry, generally.
Are generally reasonable with 5 sort of call-outs that we want them to look into further or consider further. One being the fire station, considering scenarios in which we would relocate and consider the timing change or the timing considerations. 2, to look into getting an independent absorption study. 3, to do further research on the revenue sharing allocation. 4, to consider a scenario with a CFD or other funding mechanism, including one in which we make a more equitable spread of the cost to the wider city. And 5, to consider the impact of the community benefits that are not listed in the fiscal impact analysis, like the school districts and the enterprise funds.
That was excellent.
Thank you. Okay. So, okay, so call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
I apologize, but
Oh, yes.
I just don't want there to be the next day people saying Willow Grove wants to put a community-wide assessment on existing residents. I hear your concern. We would not propose for our project any increased tax to existing residents to cover the cost of our project. It would put us in a very difficult position, and we don't think it's prudent. If those detention basins are going to serve our stormwater, the greenbelt is going to serve our residents, and we do think that it is fair that our residents pay for that. We can't make up for kind of how taxes have changed over time, but I just want to express that because we don't think that's realistic, and we think it would put us in a difficult position to ask people to vote for our project if they felt like they had to have an increased tax from it. So I apologize, I just wanted to say thank you.
Think about it. Should we amend it then to note that?
I propose an amendment to remove the phrase about equitable distribution.
And just to consider a scenario with the CFD?
Yes.
Or some similar funding mechanism?
If that's a motion to amend, I'll second that motion.
So, the person, so Commissioner Viola, who made the second, actually, of the original motion, would need to accept that as a friendly amendment, or not.
I mean, I'll accept that.
Is there a way to just note this for city council, that this is something that we discussed and we want them to be aware of? I 100% understand that it may not be feasible, but I also,
Let's do that in a subsequent motion.
Okay.
Just to like simplify this
Okay.
one to the extent we can. Okay, any further discussion before I call for a vote? Okay, so all in favor of that motion with the friendly amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so the motion carries unanimously. Okay, and then do you want to take a stab at making a motion for?
sure. Just a note to city council that the fiscal commission had a discussion about the inequitable impacts to new residents of carrying an outsized tax burden.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion?
So the motion is that we had a discussion, nothing about what we believe, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Just to note that it was an area of concern within the commission, I guess, is maybe a way you want to note it.
Question for Commissioner Huff. Thank you, I'm sorry. Is it important for that to be in a motion, or is it just important that that message is conveyed along with the transmittal from the fiscal commission?
Well, I don't know what gets transmitted. So if the staff can say yes, we'll tell that will be communicated, then that's fine.
Yeah, the minutes will be communicated,
That's fine.
so you're right, to your point. The minutes will be fully communicated, we have those, we will know, we'll see that, we'll know that this discussion occurred, we'll know all of the discussion that occurred, yeah.
I think we saw the motion on the table. Do you want to withdraw it?
I'll withdraw it.
Motion is withdrawn.
Can I make a motion? I was wanting to make a motion that maybe the council might want to consider taking into account the cost of the development on maintaining the non-development roads, because we did bring that up and discuss that, and it seemed like it's not factored in, but it does seem it could be important, given we're already have a difficulty funding our road upkeep in the projected 20-year long-range budget. So I think it would be good to consider the impact and cost that this development will create for the costs we're already projecting for the maintenance of our roads.
Is there a motion to add it to the list of items that we already made the motion on?
It's another thing they could consider,
Okay, I second.
consider that.
Okay, there's a second discussion.
I'm going to ask you to repeat the motion. I'm sorry, I really don't know what you're asking there. Can you simplify it perhaps, or restate it?
Yeah, I think the city council should consider to ask for an analysis of what this development will cost in terms of the maintenance of the transportation, the roads that are not in development, because we discussed that. that it was not part of this analysis of what this will cost, but it is significant.
You're talking about city streets, and I don't know the terminology, what difference between a street or a road, but you're talking about streets and roads outside of the development area.
Yes.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, since we had a second, I will call for a vote on it. All in favor of adding that?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll vote no.
Abstentions? No. Okay, so the motion carries with one opposed and the remaining yes. So that's 6-1, I think. Okay. If there's no further motions or discussion on item 6, then I will move us to item 7, the subcommittee updates. Do we have an update from the socially responsible investment policy?
Yeah, we're working with Chair Adair, getting some clarifications from PFMAM regarding the language of the criteria we were using. So we have to continue to work for some responses from PFMAM regarding that language. And they're still working with existing members of the finance department to get clarity on those questions. So when we have that, we should be able to bring back our work to discuss with the commission.
Okay, so I do have slight concern that this subcommittee has been going on, I think, longer than a year now, and I think they're supposed to be wrapped up within a year. So can we, do you think it's feasible to put it on the agenda as a regular item for the next meeting? You guys will be ready for us to take action on it then?
I think, especially like if there's a requirement, it takes a year. I think that if we're not ready, I think it's entirely reasonable that we should either be able to make a recommendation to the city council at the time or conclude our work.
And staff can reach out to the subcommittee since I can't produce Elena for you.
Yeah.
So we'll reach out to you and regroup and prepare something so that we can make it back for the December meeting. That works. Okay.
Is there any public comment? Okay, then I will move to the down payment assistance subcommittee for me and Niall. And for that, I will say that we don't have an update, and we are prepared to put that on the agenda, which we can discuss at the next item. Any public comment on that one? Okay. So moving to item 8, the long-range calendar. Is there any updates to the long-range calendar from staff?
No updates other than what you just added with the subcommittee comments.
Okay, perfect. And then there's something noted about the strategies for revenue generation. Are we thinking that's for the next one, or it's not sure? I'm not sure.
I mean, that's a broader one that we can bring when we are able, so we could bring it in December, or if there's other items that are taking precedence, we can bring it at a later time. So that's something that we can work with you on.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Can I add something in the long range?
Yeah.
So this is a brainstorming idea, and feel free to shoot me down. A suggestion of a thing I would be willing to do on my own, but I want to run it by you first, which is, you heard a little of my concern today. I think next year might be pretty rough between tariffs and reduced government expenditures and potential AI crashing. It might be a difficult year all around. And what I was going to suggest was, if you would like, I would reach out to people with just a few basic questions about best practices for a city dealing with a recession or economic downturn of some kind. If you like that idea, tell me who you think it would be nice to hear from, like the Mike Colemans of the world, people who've been through a lot, ideally somebody who's been at the council, commission level, or in the city government level during recessions of the past. and I could just send them a quick email. What did you learn from it? You know, what would you have done differently? What do you think we ought to know if a recession comes? I can compile those answers and give a report to the commission in a month or two. If you like that idea, tell me who you think ought to be included in that, and I can do it. I ask you for permission to say I'm a Davis Finance Commission member in these emails. If you don't think it's useful, let me know. Also, if you like the idea, I will ask staff to also give me names of people they think ought to be included.
I like it. Who's welcome?
He presented to us like back,
About a year ago.
yeah.
He's retired now, but he was worked with the League of California Cities and is kind of known as the sort of statewide expert in municipal finance, or one of the experts. And he happens to be a Davis resident, so sometimes we can.
Yeah, he gives that amazing, like handbook on like city revenue.
Oh, that was the
Mhm.
that was one of those.
I know I would appreciate that.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Is that not something that needs to be with our process for getting direction from staff? No.
That's fine. This is looking for information and really trying to educate yourselves as a commission. So it's not a problem. We don't have to ask council for permission for that.
Kelly, just in terms of Brown Act, what is the best way to compile names? It's generally not great for commissioners to email me names.
Please don't do that.
Right.
If you have ideas of people who would be good to talk with, then please send them to me, Lewis, or Alexis.
And I'll also ask you to ask around, and I'll get a list of names from you, and I'll take it from there. If all you do is collect the names, I'll send the emails and then compile it. I don't want to add much work for you.
Do we need a motion on like adding that to the long range calendar, or we can just sort of, we're discussing it and we see?
I'm looking and I'm not seeing anybody shaking their head no, so I'm going to assume there's consensus and we'll move from there.
Thanks.
Can I circle back on strategies for revenue generation real quick?
Yeah.
Is there something we can do about maybe speeding that up? In terms of,
They just lost their finance director.
well, but they did lose their economic development director, as far as I know. Like, I would just be curious how to like make this topic in particular maybe something that's more actionable than rather, opposed to just, 4 months from now receiving sort of passive presentation and then it goes into the ether.
Yeah, I'm assuming that this is something you'd like to discuss at the December meeting. So that's PDF for you.
A month from now?
Yeah.
Excellent,
I
great.
guess it would also be helpful if maybe the economic development director is like able to
Yes.
participate.
Yeah, that was part of the idea with this, was that,
Yes, we kicked that around, I think with Elena.
And I think we were asked to send questions.
Yes.
yeah, and so she had a list of, our economic development director had a list of questions about this long, and she was going to come to you with some presentation or information of this much. But she's got a wealth of knowledge and can be helpful, hopefully in just giving you the breadth of understanding of options.
Okay, excellent. And for our new commissioners, since I don't think you were there for that discussion, our economic development director has agreed to present to us on strategies for revenue generation for the city. And to help her focus her presentation, she asked that if we had like specific questions, to send them to staff so that she can tailor her presentation to address our questions. It sounds like we have a lot, but if you guys have questions, you should email staff. Okay. Anything further on item 8? Okay, if not, then we don't need a motion to adjourn the meeting, so I will just say the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.